All right, good evening and welcome to the San Bruno City Council regular meeting of May 9th, 2023. The meeting has been called to order. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Alvarez.
Here.
Councilmember Marty Medina.
Here.
Councilmember Salazar.
Here.
Vice Mayor Hamilton.
Here.
Mayor Rico Medina.
Here. Thank you very much. And if you would rise if able and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next is item number 4, public comments for items that are not on the agenda. Allow individuals up to 3 minutes to address council, both here in the audience and virtually, on anything that is not on the agenda. The Brown Act prohibits the council from discussing or acting upon any item not agendized pursuant to state law. City Clerk.
There are no in-person or remote hands raised.
Thank you. We'll move to item 5, announcements and presentations. First item is receive an update from Recology San Bruno on the recent community cleanup drop-off event, which was held on April the 29th, 2023. And we have the general manager here. Turn it over to her.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Kirsten Pinocchi. I am the general manager for Recology San Bruno. And I just wanted to give a quick update on the community cleanup event that we had on April 29th. My little clicker. Nope. Oh, there we go. Okay. I went back too far. How do I go back? Sorry. There we go. It's going. Okay. Thank you. Got it. So on April 29th, we helped about 300 residents come through our line from 8 to 11. That's about an average number that we've seen over and over. This is pretty much the spring number that we see. Fall, we'll see probably upwards of 400. So we did see 300 cars. We lined them up in 2 lines to try and keep them off of Sneath right there, so we got them in and out as fast as we could. We had some amazing volunteers, including 11 missionaries from the Church of Latter-day Saints. So those kids were incredible. They helped unload people's cars of paint and all their other items to keep things moving. We also had some wonderful volunteers. We had Mayor Medina, Vice Mayor Hamilton, and Councilmember Medina as well. So we can't do it without our volunteers. We had some community members also help, and we had several Recology employees volunteering their time. The 2 men in the bottom right corner photo are the 2 people from the church that really allow us to be there and use their entire parking lot for the day. They let us set up early, and then they let us clean up again on Monday. So if it wasn't for them, I don't think this event would be the success that it is. During that event, we gathered 43,220 pounds of garbage from residents who just needed to clean out their homes and clean things up and get ready for summer. We also collected a lot of paint. The amount of paint that we're getting is reducing, so people are kind of cleaning up their yards and their cabinets. So it is going down, but we still collect a lot of e-waste, 9,228 pounds of e-waste. So we still see some really old projectors and VCRs that are coming through. So it's kind of neat to see everyone be able to get rid of those things. We also, as you can see in the top right picture, we also repurpose or recycle 12 refrigerators, a water heater, about 14 mattresses, and some stoves and microwaves. So all that stuff gets properly drained and then recycled and kept out of the landfill. Again, our partners in this are e-recycling and Clean Harbors. We have them on site to assist us in handling all those paints and electronic devices properly. We again sent the insert down below to all the residents to allow them enough notice to come and participate in the event. And some improvements that we'll see in the fall is we will use more of our trucks. Those seem to really help move the line along faster. We're going to change the name because I think community cleanup is kind of misleading, kind of makes people feel like they're going out in the community and picking up garbage and bringing it back. So we probably will look at a name change. And this time we really noticed, again, a lot of cardboard. So being the company that we are and trying to divert as much from the landfill and repurpose and recycle, we're going to have a bin strictly for cardboard in the fall. So that'll help with some diversion as well. And that is it for our presentation. I want to thank the city for their partnership in this. It's truly instrumental. We had a CSO there that day, and then the Public Works and everyone comes and brings the A-frames, the barricades and the cones. So it truly is a group effort, and thanks for letting us do it. So, any questions?
Thank you very much for the report and the information. And again, thank you for having good weather and another successful event. Any questions or comments from colleagues? Seeing none? Oh.
No? All right. Thank you.
Vice Mayor, kudos. With that, thank you very much for your time and for being here this evening. Next, we'll move on to item B. We have a couple proclamations. Item B is issue proclamation to declare May 2023 as Asian American, Native, Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. I'll read some of the whereases. Whereas during Asian American, Native, Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, the City of San Bruno recognizes the contributions, vibrant culture, and rich heritage of the Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders, better known as, for abbreviation purposes, AA and NHPIS. And whereas as some of the fastest growing racial and ethnic groups in the nation, AA and NHPI communities represent a multitude of ethnic languages and experiences that enrich America and strengthen our union. And whereas this year's theme is Advancing Leaders Through Collaboration, which builds on a leadership advancement theme series that began late last year. And whereas time and again throughout our nation's history, AA and NHPIS have demonstrated their dedication to ideals upon which the United States is founded in times of war and in times of peace. They have faithfully defended the principles of freedom in uniform, and whereas by recognizing the contributions and the accomplishments of the men and women, we celebrate the importance of inclusion to build a brighter future. Many AA and NHPI cultures form an important part of not only our history as a country, but as our current DNA as a people. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Rico E. Medina, Mayor of the City of San Bruno, recognize the challenges faced by the AA and NHPI communities and their vital contributions to the American story, and do hereby designate the month of May as Asian American, Native, Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And again, we're acknowledging that, and we want to move on to item C, which is another proclamation, and this is recognizing May of 2023 as Jewish American Heritage Month. Whereas Jewish Americans have been an important part of American story and have greatly contributed to all areas of American life and culture since our nation's earliest days. And whereas generations have fled to the United States in search of a better life for themselves and their families, and these immigrants made invaluable contributions in support of equality and civil rights through their leadership and achievements. And whereas Jewish Americans are racially, ethnically, socially, politically, and economically diverse, with approximately 12 to 15% of Jewish folks in the United States being individuals of color. And whereas in recent years, Jewish Americans have increasingly experienced anti-Semitism, including but not limited to physical attacks, vandalism, verbal and physical harassment, and hateful comments posted on social media. And whereas San Bruno shares an obligation to condemn and combat anti-Semitism wherever it exists, to include Jewish Americans in all facets of civic life, and to stand with the Jewish community against hatred or bigotry in our city and in our country. And now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Rico E. Medina, Mayor of the City of San Bruno, declare the month of May as Jewish American Heritage Month in appreciation of the achievements and contributions made by members of the Jewish community. And again, to both, thank you very much. And again, they went in the packet, and I didn't read each whereas, but all important. And lastly, we have another proclamation. May is a busy month. This is declaring May 2023 as Wildfire Awareness Month in the city of San Bruno. Whereas the city of San Bruno is committed to ensuring the safety and security of all those living and in visiting our city. And whereas fire is a serious public safety concern, both locally and nationally, and homes are the locations where people are at the most significant risk from fire. And whereas wildfire significantly impacts California environmental, economic, and social well-being, and whereas residents of California, fire-prone communities need to accept responsibility for living in high fire hazard areas, and whereas residents should practice the home fire escape plan with everyone in the household, including visitors. And whereas residents must be prepared to survive wildfire by ensuring proper management of vegetation surrounding the home and appropriate home construction and maintenance to resist other destructions. Whereas wildfires can occur during any month, even though we are celebrating and honoring it this month. Now, therefore, I, Rico E. Medina, Mayor of the City of San Bruno, do hereby proclaim the month of May 2023 as Fire Awareness Month. And we have our Fire Chief, which I will present this and can have a few words, please.
Okay, good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the council, Ari DeLay, your fire chief. I first wanted to thank the council for its commitment to ensuring the safety and security of those residents and visitors of the city of San Bruno by making this proclamation this evening. This proclamation really highlights National Wildfire Awareness Month, and it's designed to really remind residents of California, as the mayor said, that is a very fire-prone community and that we are living in a high fire area. Measure Simple is clearing our immediate 5 feet around our house are some important steps and measures that residents can take on themselves to protect their own homes. Additionally, I wanted to thank the council for its support for our wildfire mitigation efforts through the past years and through the future through the city's wildfire mitigation program. It's an important step to protect our community, and the city council's commitment to it is much appreciated. These community wildfire mitigation efforts allow the city of San Bruno and the San Bruno Fire Department to target wildfire mitigation projects that are selected based on risk. As we saw recently in February on Sweeney Ridge, we had a fire there where high winds were able to knock power lines down and started a fire at the top of Sweeney Ridge that burned a couple acres in the middle of February with, over 30 inches of rain in our community. So it can happen at any time of the year, as the mayor said. This area had high brush, limited access, and those fires that can happen in that area really can potentially threaten our community directly, even though it is in adjacent lands that are not directly in the city of San Bruno. In summary, wildland fires have no boundaries, and our firefighters and fire prevention efforts and the wildfire mitigation that we conduct is a social contract really amongst communities where fire in one community could just as easily threaten our neighbors and our community as well. So it's in our best interest collectively to mitigate fuels and suppress fires that could grow and threaten not only our community, but those of our neighbors. So just briefly, we worked consistently with the California Conservation Crew, California Conservation Corps, Project Jericho, and a contractor that I'd like to thank for all the continuous work. And again, lastly, again, thank the council for their commitment to wildfire safety in this day with this proclamation.
Thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you.
Appreciate it and all the efforts. Finally, before we move off, announcements. Just somebody had asked me, the flags have been lowered at the municipal facilities to have staff as a mark of respect for the victims of the tragedy in Allen, Texas. Another unfortunate situation that comes up again and again, but that is why the city, by direction of, I believe, the President of the United States, all flags are lowered. With that, is there anybody that wishes to speak on the audiences in regards to any of those items under announcements and presentations?
There are no in-person or remote speakers.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll move on to the next item, which is consent. our consent calendar. All items are considered routine or implemented on an earlier council action and may be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion unless requested. There will be a single public comment period for all items at the end of this section unless a council member requests to pull an item for a separate vote. We have items 6A through 6K. Are there any members that want to pull an item for a separate vote? Seeing and hearing none. Any colleagues that wish to add a comment or have a question? I will just want to add a comment on item H for myself.
Through the mayor, I have a quick question on item F.
Thank you. Item F. Anybody else from council? Seeing and hearing none.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I didn't lean over quick enough for
That's
you.
all right.
Item G and item I.
G and I. Thank you. These again are no separate votes. First, we will go to the top and go to F. Consider adopting a resolution approving the design of the 2022-23 slurry and seal project, authorizing the city manager to execute a construction contract with American Asphalt Repair and Resurfacing Company, Inc. for the 22-23 slurry seal project in the amount not to exceed, and it goes into the various approvals, so there's a few more of those which are on the agenda. Vice Mayor.
I only picked the long ones to make you read them. This is just a very quick question. I'm very excited to see this coming before us and to see work on our streets, which is long overdue. So I'm happy to see this come through. We had previously received word that 2023 was going to be more of a year of planning and not so much for execution. Is that changed, and will we be seeing projects actually hitting the ground? I don't need specifics on this street, that street. I just want to understand if we're going to be actually doing work on the streets during the calendar.
Certainly, Councilmember Hamilton. Thank you very much. And I may ask Director Matt Lee to come to the podium. But I've been chatting with council members as well as with Public Works Director Lee. He has indicated that we are putting the plans out to bid here soon for the laying of asphalt, and that there is a hope that we will have some streets being paved actually by the end of the calendar year. Is that a true statement?
Director, is that a true statement?
That is a true statement. As we're trying to accelerate paving as quickly as possible. City manager's budget meeting for CIP projects at the town hall meeting and at various Measure G meetings. We talked about timelines and the various projects we have for paving. There's a three-prong effort. There's three projects that fold into our pavement rehabilitation program. One is the pavement rehab program, which is a slurry seal. The other component is the pavement rehabilitation, which is a 2-inch overlay. And the third component is a pavement reconstruction, which is reconstructing the structural base of the roadway. We have all three of those projects this year. We've been working on it. Obviously, as you see in the consent item, the slurry seal project is coming first, as it's a little easier to design. All the other pavement reconstruction and rehabilitation takes a little more design effort, which comes from the curb ramps that need to be redesigned and the drainage for the curb ramps at the intersections where we're paving and fall of this year for award, so that we can hopefully try to begin construction in later this year. Obviously, a lot of factors come into play, and so our hope is to try to make that timeline.
That's great. Thank you. And I appreciate you letting me put you on the spot to bring this good news forward. This is really good news for our community. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments, Director, on this? Thank you, Director. Let's move on to G. Consider adopting a resolution approving the special events permit with the temporary road closures of various streets in coordination with the annual Posey Parade, subject to conditions of approval. Action plan for the event in the total amount of up to $96,938.23, and appropriating that said money from the general fund reserves in this fiscal operating budget. Councilmember Medina.
Yeah, thank you. And I pulled this item because of a couple reasons. One, full disclosure, I am a San Bruno Lion, proud to be a Lion, I know how dear the Posey Parade is to our community. And generally when things get on consent, people aren't really paying too much attention. It gets approved, it gets changed, and then in another week from now, we're going to hear, so when's the Posey Parade, right? So I submitted a number of questions. The way that the Posey Parade has been operating in the past is different as we're going forward. And I think it's really important that our community is aware of it, of these changes, and that's why I'm pulling it, so that we have better awareness of why the change, what's it going to cost, and yet how much fun it's still going to be. So that's why I was hoping that to be able to have staff provide a little bit of a brief summary so that we could have a well-informed community. And I also noticed that we have the lioness in the house who's running the Posey Parade this year. So just want to acknowledge that, if it's possible, Mr. Mayor, for a brief, I know it's in the staff report, but
It is.
just the brief details about it.
Jennifer Dianos, if you're able to step forward for us, please.
Yeah, while Assistant to the City Manager Jennifer Dianos is stepping forward, staff has been working diligently on this project. As council will understand, I inherited this, put in my lap, and lots of focus on this for the past month. Our real goal is a safe and fun parade, and we're part of the setup for a safe and fun parade. So, Ms. Dianos.
Thank you, City Manager McIntyre. Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council, my name is Jennifer Dianos. I'm here this evening to talk to you about the Posey Parade. We have a short presentation that will be on display in just a moment, but I will go ahead and get started in the meantime. We did receive a special event application from the San Bruno Lions Club, and this was for the 81st annual Posey Parade. There was a bit of hiatus during the COVID-19 restrictions, but since 2022, the parade has been held annually. It's typically held the first Sunday of each June, and so it's currently scheduled for June 4th, 2023. City staff did have an opportunity to meet with the San Bruno Lions to talk about the event requirements, and that includes health food permit, the parade route, the traffic control plan, safety plan. The Lions Club requested assistance in the development of a couple of these components, including the traffic control plan. That traffic control plan, it really follows the current safety standards, and it really ensures the safety of all patrons and participants with current standards and MUTCD requirements. In the last month, from a public safety perspective, in the last 12 months, from the public safety perspective, there had been 9 known incidences of a vehicle crashing into a parade in the United States. That included 20 injuries over the span of those incidences, 0 deaths, but only 1 case where it was determined to be an intentional act. The proposed route of the parade is slightly different than years past. In former years, it did go along San Mateo Avenue, and it crossed an 8-lane state route, El Camino Real. The new route, it's a little difficult to see on the screen here in the room, but it does start towards the rear of San Bruno City Hall, so that's on Linden, and it goes down all the way to Crystal Springs, and then up Crystal Springs and ends at City Park, 251 City Parkway. On the screen here, we do have 2 options for the costs associated with the safety plan and the implementation of the safety plan. Those are detailed for the actual MUTCD plan that's reviewed by our in-house city engineer, day of logistics, and then an actual incident action plan. Option 1 has been recommended by staff for direct control and highest level of city involvement in the process, and that amount is $96,938.23. that is a high-level overview of the parade itself. I skipped a slide there. Council consideration is as read by the mayor just a few minutes ago, but that would be consideration of the waiver of the fees and then the allocation of funds to support that. And so I did include a historic picture here of the parade. This was in our archives and dated 1954, so that's fun to see. Different route, but same intent. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and then I do have my colleagues here from the police department and the public works department and our very own San Bruno Lions representative for more detailed questions.
Thank you very much for the report and the information. Mr. Medina?
Yes. So I see in the staff report that the availability of the K-rail is something that may be difficult to obtain. And my suggestion would be the options of other type of rail barrier systems. They are out there. I have spoken to the city manager about it, and he's familiar with those type of systems that are very portable and are presently available. So I just wanted to offer that, and also thank everyone for the work on getting us to this point. We want to have a parade. We want to do it safely, and there are costs associated with that, and we have to be aware that somebody has to pay for it. So I am in favor of this, and thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from colleagues? Any comments from colleagues? All I would, and thank you for everything in your report. Appreciate it being up there. Just was saying, if this should pass and after this parade, I would recommend very highly that Lions as well as the city come together, kind of see what transpired, how it went, going forward, costs, etc. And I think all sitting down with a debrief soon thereafter is positive, looking for the future. So thank you. Okay, with nothing else at that I'm seeing at this time. Item H, consider adoption of resolution authorizing the display of the LGBTQ and Progress Pride flag on designated city facility, which would be City Hall, Flagpole for Pride Month, which is for the month of June 2023. Normally, that would be something maybe I would put under council comment, then we would bring it back. So it is. This has been done a couple years, so it is on for a resolution. And what I have done this time is I wanted to see, we've had post-COVID and other things, but to have actually a little raising of the flag ceremony on that day in front of City Hall. It'll be something simple like in other municipalities and jurisdictions, but I have been working with the commission and the county in order to have that facilitated. The logistics and specifics would be given out and announced at the next council meeting, but I did want to let everyone know that will be occurring most likely on the morning of June the 1st. Any other questions or comments on that? Thank you. With that, I think I've gone through all the items. Is there any members of the public that wish? Yes.
Item I.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. I apologize. You were voting. Thank you again. Item I, consider adoption of a resolution accepting the city council's fiscal year 23-24 focus in areas and strategic initiatives.
I think it's great that we have this document here with us. It's quite lengthy. We spent a full day going over all these items, and I just want to make sure that I'm clear with everyone that there's a lot of work that still needs to be done to prioritize the items that we have in front of us. So accepting them as what we talked about at the meeting, that's factual. But I think in order to move forward, that we need to have a study session to go through these items and actually prioritize them. We did a rough priority, but I think more work needs to be done. I'm also cognizant of the amount of time and what we're doing currently with the load of work that staff has as they are preparing our budget. But I'm hopeful that we'll be able to come back and have this study session to go over these items.
Any other comments from the interim city manager who did sit here with then city manager Grogan, wanted to just say, did we hear it right? Did we prioritize it right? Were those topics correct? We spent 9 hours on Saturday with staff and council to go over and finalize that. So if this is another study session to go over what we did for the 9 hours, I'd be prioritized correctly. Was there something that maybe wasn't captured correctly? Is there something that it's like, I think in retrospect, number 30, maybe we can put it on a shelf somewhere and then bring that back at a separate time. So that's what I'm looking for, because a lot was done. And so to have another study session, which could be, I don't know how many hours, but it was a 9-hour process on that. So anyway, that's just my kind of question as far as where are we going with this?
We're going to prioritize all these things because it's too much. We reduced some, we got some complete. Which ones are the most important? And which ones should we be working on? And what order? So we have a rough priority, but there's still too many. And what's our next step with it?
And the only thing I'm going to say is we had an opportunity to withdraw and prioritize, to my knowledge, on that day. And in addition, I think staff needs clear direction because they're working on the budget as we speak. And so to say we need a study session to reprioritize, I think that kind of puts things on hold, and I don't want to see that happen. But
so we clearly need to have a budget approved, and those are the things that staff is working on. And as we start looking at how many are on here? There's 25 different titles, but there are subsets to those titles, right? We need to refine it. And we could talk to our city manager in our one-on-one meetings and kind of try to get there. But at some point, for instance, when are we going to do a climate action plan? That's been on this initiative for a couple of years, and it's not getting done. So I think we need to reduce the amount, and we need to say what we want to get done first, because what happened at that meeting is that we spent hours going over the various items, and we didn't spend enough time. So at some point, we need to really provide a workable set of projects that can get done, and I don't see that with the ones that we have for this year. There's multi-year projects here, and seeing if it doesn't get started this year, that means it's not gonna happen. So that's pretty much where I'm going at, because if we don't do that, then what gets done first?
well, you brought up climate action plan, which is allocation of staff resources to undertake or oversee the effort, which is a budgetary item, which will be coming up. So that has been categorized as very important and to go forward. You're correct, it hasn't happened, but we've already categorized it for one, to have it happen.
Sure.
And again, rather than giving a direction from the dais and saying you will have it done by X time, I think that's where the budget process comes in order to help identify with the resources that we have, both staff and economics.
I think we're getting closer to coming into agreement. 17, is that, I went through it really quick if anybody has that number. But I made my point. I spent enough time talking about it. My experience here on the council is that we set up too many things without clear direction. Even saying it's a high priority, we're not being involved enough to see what the things that we really want to get done get accomplished. So that's it. I'm willing to accept these as part of the consent. I understand the need for it from our city manager. I just needed to also ask for that, and we'll see what we get after budget.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments on that topic from colleagues? now I think I now have hit them all. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak on any of the items on consent 6A through 6K?
We have one remote hand raised, Virginia Yankee. Virginia, whenever you're ready, you may begin.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
This is Joe Yank, Elm Avenue. I just have a comment about the last slurry deal. I live at the top of a hill, so there's a curve, and the slurry guy comes through, and instead of dumping any slurry, he scrapes off what's on the top of the hill and goes on. So we didn't get any slurry, and keep that in your mind, 217 Elm Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Next speaker, please.
There are no other remote hands raised.
Thank you very much. With that, I'll bring it back to council for action. Again, this is consent, items 6A through 6K. Councilmember Salazar.
Move to approve. I'll second.
Second.
Motion Salazar, seconded Hamilton. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? 5-0 passes unanimously. Now we'll move on to item number 7, conduct of business.
Item 7A, consider adoption of an ordinance of the San Bruno City Council amending section 2.04.110B of the San Bruno Municipal Code establishing procedures for selection of vice mayor.
Thank you very much.
Okay, good evening, Mayor and council members. I am here to present item 7A as I just read to you. Our objective is to consider the introduction of an ordinance amending the municipal code establishing the procedure for selection of vice mayor. A little background on the item. The current section of the municipal code for selection of vice mayor provides a rotation ranked by the time of service on the council, with the longest serving council member at the top of the rotation list and newly elected council members added to the bottom of the list. In the event that there is more than one newly elected council member, the section provides that the names be added based on the order the candidates appeared on the ballot. As you know, in March of 2022, the City Council established a city district map and by-district elections. Based on this current change, the current rotational process no longer works in selecting the order of two newly elected council members. The proposed ordinance brought before you today amends the procedure so that it is consistent with the city's new by-district election process. Council members would continue to be appointed vice mayor on a rotational basis according to the amount of time served on council. However, it amends the process when there are two new members elected at the same time. The proposed ordinance provides that the newly elected council members be added to the rotational list according to their district number from lowest to highest number. In final, tonight's recommended action is to introduce, read by title only, and waive further reading of an ordinance of the San Bruno City Council amending section 204.110B of the San Bruno Municipal Code establishing procedures for selection of the vice mayor. This concludes my presentation, and I am available for questions.
Thank you very much for the report. Just in summary, in case there was any audio concern, in giving some history. So in the city of San Bruno, the vice mayor rotation used to be the newest person that gets elected, would get sworn into office, and then would become the vice mayor, a heartbeat away. So the council did change that to where it was a person with the most seniority, had some experience and had been in the council. Now, that all worked fine, so you have a directly elected mayor, you have the rotation of the vice mayor already in place. So for the city of San Bruno, when it came to that night, there was no vote, discussion, debate, deliberation. It was done. However, when we went to districts, what it is doing now is if you have two new people elected at the same time, when that comes up, who goes first? If they have the equal time that they were elected, and sworn into office. And that's what's before us tonight. I know that there is the idea to have it ordinance rotational order according to the district number, which would mean it would go to 1 in the lowest to the highest to 4. My suggestion is that we do because as we usually we do have a transition meeting in December. We usually don't need to make that determination. The vice mayor will already be in the queue, shall we say, in the process. It's already been established, but it would be for that election that just took place. And rather than saying it's always District 1 or District 4 in between, I think, as we have done in the past, is having it pulled out, the 2 names being 2 or 3, or however many names, be placed in a hat or however, and pulled. And it could be pulled by the city clerk, and then that person would be next in that sequence. That procedure is used sometimes for when there is a tie vote, not here maybe, but there's sometimes a flip of a coin. You may have read that. There also has been times of past practice when the city of San Bruno has had recusal of 3 council members, and then our names went into a hat. 1 name was pulled and then placed back into the council so that you had 3 votes, which is required to hear any action item. So that's my only modification that I think would be more reasonable and fair. And again, it is kind of a luck of a draw, but I think then it doesn't establish which district always would have that, shall we say, opportunity. So those are my comments, and I open it to my colleagues. Vice Mayor.
So just to get clarity on your suggestion, what you laid out is still a tiebreaker scenario.
Yes.
So we would still be the most senior person is the rotation, but then if there are 2 people elected together, we would draw from a hat rather than have 2 always beat 3 or 1 always beat 4.
You're correct.
Got it.
Other questions or comments from colleagues at this time? If not, are there any members of the public that would like to speak on this item?
There are no hands raised.
And then I bring it back to the city council for any further deliberation and or consideration or action. It is to adopt an ordinance. Councilmember Salazar.
Through the chair, there's no other discussion. I will make a motion to approve the ordinance as modified by the mayor's recommendation.
Motion is on the floor to approve the recommendation with the modification that it, as stated by myself earlier.
Mr. Mayor,
I'm sorry?
if I might on the motion,
Please.
if you are going to vote to modify the ordinance, my recommendation is maybe we have some time.
To bring it back?
Direct staff to come back with an ordinance, and that way we can present in front of you
A
a
clean-
process that you can review. The ordinance is clean and it's clear what you're approving today.
And we're in no immediate rush, so I think that is the best judgment. So we're not doing things on the fly, and we have it very clearly identified from us. Is the motion maker okay with that?
Yes.
Okay, is that okay with colleagues? Can we just,
I think that's consistent with your typical
policies and
policies and
procedures now?
yes.
Okay, so Councilmember Salazar, did you want to modify maybe your motion? Or maybe not?
Okay, sure. I will make a motion to request staff to come back with the modified ordinance reflecting the mayor's desire to do a luck of the draw process for selecting vice mayor.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes 5-0 unanimous to please bring back the modified ordinance for adoption at a future meeting. With that, we'll move on to item B, please.
Item 7B, review and provide direction on Crestmoor multi-use fields master plan design alternatives.
And I'm sorry, thank you for reading that, and before we begin, please, if we can pause, and I'd like to turn it over to Vice Mayor Hamilton.
So due to the proximity of the Crestmoor site to my home, I am prohibited by law from participating in this item, and I am recused, and I will step out of the room. Thank you.
Please proceed.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor Medina and fellow council members. My name is Damian Sandholm, the Acting Community Services Director. This evening's presentation will be conducted by Brian Fletcher of Calendar Associates Landscape Architects. Calendar Associates has been contracted by the city to develop a multi-use master plan for the area known as the Crestmoor Field site. In the presentation, Brian will briefly discuss the history of the property, its current state, and options for the future of the site. With that, I will turn it over to Brian.
Good evening and welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, council members. Brian Fletcher, principal with Calendar Associates Landscape Architects. I am very excited to come before you tonight and let you know what we've been working with your community on, and excited to get your feedback. So hopefully I can make this work. Fantastic. So tonight I'm going to go through a few things on the agenda: the background, the project goals, the process that we've been going through, as well as the schedule to date and what's going to happen in the future. I'm going to be discussing a couple preliminary alternatives that we've worked with stakeholders and the community on, as well as the Parks and Rec Commission. I'm going to share the input received and also recommendations moving forward, as well as items to consider and next steps. So that's the agenda for tonight. You can see on the right-hand side, if you're not familiar exactly where Crestmoor Fields are, it's off of 280 and between Skyline and 280. You can see on the map to the right. A little bit of the project background. The school closed in, I believe, 1980 because of declining enrollment. The school district is now in contract with a developer for the site to be purchased for a single-family home development. That development application does include land dedication to the city for a public park. The city initiated this master planning process that we're going to be talking to tonight on, which includes stakeholder and community engagement to build consensus for a final design of the park and public park improvements. Some of the project goals that we've been working with is to build on the initial site planning efforts that took place before we got on board, develop a master plan that balances the needs of all stakeholders and users, meet the needs of the sports user groups, and obviously with soccer being predominantly on the fields today, meeting the needs of the soccer groups. Provide a design that invites multi-generational use, maintain sensitivity to the adjacent neighborhoods, and then continually evaluate the costs of the project to make sure that the project is both feasible as far as design and construction, but also financially feasible, and to ensure that implementation is actually realized. That's the whole goal, is to build a park out there. So before you, I've got a process diagram that kind of graphically depicts what we've been working on. As you can see, we've completed a few of the steps, but we're still early on in the process. So there's still work to be done. We had some initial outreach with stakeholders. We met with the community with some initial site plans, which you'll see tonight. We've also met with the Park and Rec Commission. So tonight I'm going to be presenting those alternatives. In the future, we're going to be continuing to use your input tonight, as well as continued outreach to the community, the stakeholders, to develop a more refined master plan, which will come before you again. So taking that process, we've now added a timeline to it. And you can see on the top, we are portraying graphically what the timeline is for the master planning project. We hope to bring that refined master plan back to you by September of this year. So this is an aerial view of the site. You can see on the right-hand side is the high school site. And then you can see starting in the middle is what we call the upper field. And on the bottom with the running track is what we call the lower field. You can see Cortland Drive is that roadway that's on the top-hand side, or the top of the page itself. The study area for the park improvements, we've identified it with the dashed red line, and that's going to be important on a future slide to remember that location of that dashed red line. So you can see that the park improvements generally are all of the lower field and a portion of the upper field. These are just a few photographs of the project area. I'm sure you're probably familiar with it. I'm going to go from 1 through 6 there. We do see some opportunity sites on the east side of Cortland Drive. You can see that on the first slide. On the second slide along Cortland Drive, you're probably aware that there is parking that's currently happening in the dirt area during soccer games and events. The third slide is a picture of the lower field, as well as the fourth slide. You can see the running track as well as some temporary lighting that's been used out there. 5, it's important to note that we are on a slope site. So you can see the difference in elevation between the upper field on the left-hand side of that image and the lower field on the right-hand side. And then finally, the last image is the upper field. What I have here before you is an illustration of the preliminary development plan with our project site identified. So again, remember that dashed red line that I showed you earlier? This is the same dashed red line and the project area that we are studying today. And it's made up of the lower area, the lower fields, and a portion of the upper fields, as well as the eastern side of Cortland Drive. You'll also start to notice a darker green area on kind of the lower left-hand corner of our site. That is a required stormwater treatment area that we've maintained throughout our alternatives, and you'll see that moving forward. So now I'm going to present the 2 alternatives. First off, I thought I'd talk a little bit about commonalities between the 2. Both alternatives provide an on-site parking lot and drop-off zone that is similar in size. Both has access from Cortland and also on A Street, which is the first street within the private development. Both have proposed parking along Cortland Drive, which we're currently working with, what the final design and orientation would be on that. Both of them have that similar sized bioretention area. You can see on the bottom of this first image in the lighter green, as well as both are going to propose a restroom concession building. But you'll see that there's slight differences on the location of that, as well as kind of the configuration of that restroom, which I'll point out. Finally, both alternatives have a perimeter walking path around the fields, as well as both have the opportunity to support synthetic turf and field lighting if that's a direction that you choose to go. So first off, with this first alternative, this alternative shows striping for 7 fields. However, all cannot be played at once because you'll notice that there are overlapping field configurations, and that's to configure a number of different age group size fields throughout the site. This alternative, the mix of fields, slightly favors smaller fields than alternative 2. The inclusion, this alternative includes a single U6, and when I say U6, that's generally age group, so 6-year-olds. A single U6 field, 3 U8 fields, and still provides options for a single U10, U11, and an 11v11 field, which are the older high school and adults. The smaller field dimensions of this alternative allow for inclusion of picnic areas, and you can see those in the gray on the left-hand side, and picnic shelters, so shade, protection, wind, and such. The restroom concession building is in the upper left-hand corner of the fields, It's slightly moved away from the parking lot from alternative number 2 and provides a greater space in and around that restroom concession for safety, as well as flexibility and configuration of that restroom concession building. So that's alternative 1. Alternative number 2 continues to provide striping for 7 fields, and again, not all of them can be played at once. However, the mix on this alternative slightly favors larger fields. It doesn't have any U6 fields. It has 2 U8 fields, 3 U10s, along with a single U12 and 11v11 field. The larger field dimensions mean more grass and turf area on this one, which reduces the space for picnic areas and shelters. While the restroom concession building, you can see, is on the upper right-hand corner of the park site, right adjacent to the parking lot. It's closer proximity to the parking lot. Also, because of this and because of the grades, the restroom would be configured in kind of more long and linear with less space in and around the picnic shelter available for just general milling about and waiting to get their snacks. So we presented those to the public, and I'm really pleased with the turnout that we did have. We had an event on April 3rd that we did have 28 people show up, but at the same time, we also did an online survey, which we had 400 residents participate in, which is fantastic turnout and fantastic input that we got. This slide provides a basic summary of what we heard during that. You can see alternative 1 was favored 52% to 41%. And what people were saying is they preferred alternative 1 because of the more park space, picnic areas, and seating options. Other improvements suggested during the input included bleacher seating, walking track, wind protection, additional shade, exercise station, dog areas. Consider other sports, and make sure to provide enough parking. So because of all that, we and staff are recommending moving forward and continuing to evaluate alternative number 1. We feel that this shows a more complete park with walking trails and picnic areas that can be used by the neighborhood, not just sports groups. More space for goal storage and maintenance equipment, as well as additional storage for the sports groups itself. And you can see those in kind of the tan areas on the left-hand side of the fields. Space for teams to congregate while they're waiting for their games to start. That would happen in the picnic areas and those gray areas. And additional options for seating, including seating built into the hillsides and other furnishings around. So we can take advantage of the sloping site, and we can build in bleacher seating into those slopes as well. Finally, the other recommendations, because of the restroom concession area, is moved away from the cars and is safer for the kids to be congregating around the restroom concession building because of that distance separation and the additional space that is around. However, this alternative is far from finished. There's still work to be done and items to consider, and we're looking forward to your input on this. Our plan is to continue to vet these issues with your input tonight, with the stakeholders, with the community, before we bring you a refined master plan to consider closer to September. Parking management is one of those issues. Parking supply and demand will be the primary limiting factor in how many games can be played and scheduled at any one time. We need to make sure, again, one of those goals was not to impact the neighborhood, so we need to ensure we've got enough parking. So our intent moving forward is to provide as many games as possible and avoid spillover impacts to the neighborhood. Field lighting. Lighting allows greater use of the fields, however, at a greater cost, and with potential neighborhood impacts with glare. Although technology has high cutoff fixtures and such, it still has the potential. Finally, another item to consider is natural or artificial turf. Again, artificial turf, like lighting, allows for additional hours for games to be played. and for multiple sports. But however, it's got a higher initial cost, obviously. However, it also requires less maintenance than natural turf. It doesn't have the same amount of downtime for regeneration of turf and is more available during inclement weather. So here we are back at that graphic depiction and just wanted to talk about next steps. We'll take your input tonight and develop a draft master plan to take through an additional round of input and hope to bring back a new plan with additional details in September. So with that, I'm available for any questions.
Thank you very much for the report and the information. Do we have any questions on the presentation from colleagues at this time on the presentation? This is an informational item. Obviously, we'll be getting some feedback. With that, I'd like to open it up to the public, those with priority that are here with us this evening. And thank you for being here. And those on Zoom next, please.
Good evening, Council. My name's Joe Meyer. I'm a resident here of San Bruno. I live on Chestnut Avenue. I'd like to just bring up a few concerns that I have regarding the plan that's been brought forward. The first one is the bioretention area that's on the western end of it. This is a direct result of the housing development, and I'm concerned with the liability of this being on what is soon to be city property, at some point would initially be. It's inside that red dotted line that's going to end up being city property at some point. Does the city have any liability with this? Do the community or the people of San Bruno have any liability regarding this? It's almost 30,000 square feet of area. You know, that's one of the bigger concerns there. The other one is it really affects the development of that site. If you take out that 30,000 square feet, it allows it to be a lot more community friendly, more of these opened areas, picnic areas. We're already losing from 9 acres down to slightly over 4 is what they're suggesting. And that includes the 30,000 square feet. That's almost 3/4 of an acre. That can make a big difference on how that field is developed up there and how the community uses it. So I'd like you to consider that. Why is that in there? Should it be someplace else? There are other options that could possibly be put. Can it be put on the other side of Cortland Drive? The city is going to own property over there. If it has to be on city land, can it be put on the other side of Cortland Drive? Can it be put on the outside edges of the field as a barrier that would give us more usable space out there? So that's one of the biggest concerns that I have. Another one is the parking that's up there. You know, having the games so limited, where are all these parents going to park, bring their kids, drop off? The parking area, it's not clear. Does that parking lot actually follow all the way through to that upper street, or do they have to come in, drop off their kids, turn around, and drive back out? If it's not going all the way through, that's another large issue. The other thing you brought up that brought to my attention is fire mitigation, the hillside. Who's responsible for maintaining that hillside? It's not going to be city property from what I've heard. It's going to remain property of the homeowners association. But who's going to clear all those dead trees out of it right now at this point? There's dozens of dead trees currently standing on that. And when does that happen? You know, who does that? Is that a responsibility of the city? Is it the developer? On there. Those are just a few of the concerns that I have. I hope you take those into consideration when you're evaluating this and get some answers. That's all. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, City Council. I've been a citizen of San Bruno for over 30 years, and I've been heavily involved with the soccer program. Once my children have actually grown of age, and they're no longer participating in soccer anymore for the last 20-something years. But I've seen a few people out at the field several times out there, and I remember when Rico actually was at the Park and Rec when I first started here, so it's come a long way. Anyway, I just wanted to point out something. I want to just reverb what Joe kind of said. It's about the treatment center for the stormwater. So I just happened to be out there maintaining the fields the other day, and the water department came by, and I just want to make the council aware of it. So there's the sewer that's there that at the far corner of where the bio area would be. So they're going to use the existing storm system that's there, and it drops down on a steep grade right into the neighbor's backyard, right down below down there. And they have problems with overflow already that sometimes it pops up. And I wasn't aware of this fact, and so it's just something you may want to talk to the water department about it. So there is an alternative. They just would have to run it a different way and to divert that water from that whole thing down the main street instead, because I happened to talk to the person that was from the water department. It was just out of the blue, just happened. So I just wanted to point that out today, that was one concern that I had. And I like the alternative that we actually had it in like in the very beginning. And it sounds like we're going to go with number one, and it's great that you actually hired Brian in this architectural firm because he's doing a great job. He's been meeting with us, and they've been great to work with. The only thing I wanted to point out was the size of the fields, and I know that because of the way the documents were all written, when I've talked to the school board and the panel that the two by two meetings that you've had, so they met, and for some reason they came up with that space that had that very defined space, that little red space that's there. But I think if we had to keep that sewer retention water area there, maybe we just tweak it slightly so we can at least make the size of the field large enough so that it would actually accommodate the size, because you're basically trying to fit something in a footprint. And just by tweaking it slightly, I think if we go with there, when you look and you review the actual drawings, I think we can fit the full-size fields on there. And the way it's drawn with alternate number one, we'll be able to play the full-size game, but then you're not going to be able to play the other games there. So Brian's recommended going that way, and he's the architect that you've gone for. So I'm going to say our support would go that way because it should look more like a park, but it's just considering the size of those fields. And he's told him we would give him some more input. So he actually requested the size of the fields that I thought could be the minimums that may actually would work there. So I just wanted to point out today, and thank you for your time. And the last thing I wanted to say was we're going to need a place to play. And when I've been going to the meetings, so they have to decide when we actually move from there, what the city's actually going to do and how to actually, I want the council to consider Monteverde or somewhere else where we're going to need a temporary place. And I don't know if the developers give you a timeline when we're off Crestmoor so we can actually return to Crestmoor. So it's another consideration you have to factor in this whole thing. So you have a lot of things on your shoulders, and I just thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you very much for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Honorable Mayor and distinguished members of the City Council, our City Council. You know me as a commissioner of the Park and Rec, but I'm speaking tonight as a private citizen, 520 Skyline Boulevard. When I heard the school district, the San Mateo Union High School District was planning to sell the property at Crestmoor, I became very concerned. I know many of the coaches. I know Brian Hafter, who we recognized as Citizen of the Year 2 years ago, is a coach and a referee. He told me about his concerns. And, you know, I was thinking 1,500 kids play there on a weekend, or about that amount. What's going to happen to those boys and girls? And so we looked at the Caltrans property at Skyline and San Bruno Avenue, and we looked at improving Monteverde Park. And that's where my own son started AYSO soccer at 6 years old. So as a teacher, I know how important it is for the development of youngsters to socialize with each other, learn athletic skills, and that's important to their development. And without that facility, we're in big trouble. So Brian came to our Park and Rec Commission meeting last April and presented the same. So we had a chance to do input, and as my two colleagues before me stated, right on line with what they were saying. So I'm excited about this possibility of having the two opportunities there. And as Brian said, this is a project in progress. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please. Okay, thank you very much. To staff, I'm going to bring it back to colleagues, but there were a couple of questions or comments that were raised, whether it was fire mitigation or the drop-off or the bioretention and liability. Is there anyone that might be able just to add some context to that? Thank you. Because nobody else stood up, so Peter, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I'm Peter Gilly. I'm the Community Development Director, and we're partnering with the Community Services Department. They're managing the park aspect of it, and our department is working on the actual project development. And so one of the slides that was shown showed that we are really very early in the process. The EIR, Environmental Impact Report, has just started. So we are not at the point where we have a lot of answers to specific and detailed questions. We are going to get there. There are aspects of this project that have come before council before about the general location of where the park is. There is a settlement agreement between the city and the school district on an agreement of the acreage that will be dedicated and the general location. And so what we're talking about here is in alignment with all of those past discussions. But as I said, we will have specific answers for all of those questions as we get further along in the process. Some of them are going to be very much covered in detail at the Planning Commission meetings on the project itself and such. So at this point, don't have a lot of answers, but do want to emphasize we are very early in the process.
Thank you, Director. Questions or comments from colleagues this evening? Seeing, and again, it is informational. We can provide any direction. There were alternatives 1 and 2. I think staff, and correct me, is maybe looking for some direction from the council as to where they may wish to go so that they could hear our input and start to continue their efforts and work. And I know there's a lot happening, and I get that. And before I open it up, I might suggest that all happening at the same time. I know that's a lot, and there's a lot of moving parts, but I really think a collaborative effort is really needed to kind of keep us all on track and trying to deal with both at the same time. So, colleagues, Councilmember Medina.
Yes, and thank you. So the questions that can be answered tonight, I'm hoping maybe we can have an answer for that, Mr. Mayor. Can we start with that one?
Is there more questions for this particular department, you think, or maybe?
And all of the environmental questions would be vetted there.
Answered. I just don't know if there's other questions why we have him standing up here.
I don't think so. I hope not.
Okay, Director.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. So in the settlement agreement, the stormwater retention area for the overall development project. And so it would be on city land. Whether or not between now and the entitlement, an agreement may be worked out with the developer to share some of the maintenance costs, that's unknown. We're very early in the process, but it would be on city land, and we would certainly have a role in the maintenance of it.
Okay, that's somewhat of an answer. It could be negotiated and then relocating it. And
because the settlement agreement proposed it in that location, we have not gone against that aspect of the settlement agreement.
Okay. I got another question then. Just wanted to clarify for the parking that the parking doesn't go through.
Yes, it absolutely does go through.
It does go through.
So there is an entrance and an exit on Cortland. And there's also an entrance exit on A Street, which is that parallel. Provide the square footage, but we can squeeze, push, and kind of manipulate it. And that's what we've been working to try to do to maximize the fields.
So you don't have to need as much space?
No, we're still going to need the same amount of square footage
Okay.
on maximizing field use and where it goes. So we can push it and move it, but not within reason.
There's some,
Hope
there's
that
some,
helps.
there's some wiggle room there, but it's not any drastic
No.
increase in field use or size. Fair?
Yep, fair.
For the fire mitigation, if that question could be answered about who would be responsible for.
Manager, I'll answer that. And I'll also just clarify that this fire retention areas, the city would grant or the developer would offer to dedicate the land with an easement. And my understanding is their responsibility for the maintenance would be actually the developer. But we have the developer's representative in the room. Yeah, she's confirming it. So there wouldn't be a city cost to that. Similarly, with the privately owned hillside area or open space, that would also ultimately be owned, have binding conditions of approval, possibly EIR mitigation measures, requiring them to maintain those open space areas to common standards for wildfire fuel reduction and so on. So there would be no city costs associated with that privately owned open space for long-term maintenance.
Fantastic.
Well, and just for clarity, Chief DeLay was there. Was it not all of that? I don't want to give the wrong impression too. Some of that it has to do with the freeway. Some of that has to do. It's not just the whole hillside. I just don't want a misconception of how that may have.
One other last question I have about parking is, will there be restrictions from people who want to go to watch the soccer games from parking in the residential neighborhood? That's going to happen. When you need to drop off your kid to a game, you're going to find a spot to drop, or you're going to find a place to park. So just wanted to clarify that there are currently no restrictions on parking in the neighborhood.
I'll take it. Oh.
Look at that.
Sorry, I don't know.
Mr. Gilly, try.
Right. Okay. Sorry for that. So when people come to the game to watch and drop off their kid, to watch the game and to park, they're going to want to park wherever they can. And some people are going to likely park on Cortland, and if there's any parking available, and they will also look to park in the new neighborhood. And I just wanted to see, were there any restrictions planned for that?
So as was described in the presentation, the amount of parking that is going to be available, the developer's working with the city on a design of Cortland that could have a significant amount of parking on Cortland. In addition, there's the parking spaces that are in the park, and when we are going to end up calculating how much capacity there is for games, it will be based on the parking that is, counting any of the street parking in the existing neighborhood, not counting any of the street parking in the private streets of the new neighborhood. So we're designing it so there will be enough supply of publicly accessible parking spaces for the park users for the number of games being proposed. People to be parking in the existing neighborhood and the new neighborhood that's being created. These will be private streets that the homeowners association will have the authority to mark off as private parking, and they'll be able to regulate that.
I think that's what the council member was asking was, okay, now we have an HOA. Theoretically, they could say there is no parking here. I think is what the council member just wanted some clarity.
Yes, in our conversations with the development team, the private developer, the expectation is when the entitlement comes forward for final approval, all of those nuances are going to be worked out.
And to determine that, you need to know how many games can be played, and then making sure that there's some space between the games. Because what happens at our current fields, for our baseball fields, if you have a game that starts at 3 and that goes for 2 hours and 15 minutes, you schedule the next game at 5:15 or whatever that is, you have people that are watching the game and people coming to the game, and so it's a mess, right? So that is, I think we have enough experience. We come up with the best solution.
Yes.
And as well as for the lighting, the whole point is that we need, since we have less fields, if we have lighting, we extend the amount of time that our youth and adults can play on those fields and recreate. So I know from my experience that having the lights at Lions Field, having artificial turf at pump system for the artificial turf drainage, but knowing that we're having such a huge decrease in our playing fields, and this will probably be covered in the EIR as well, is the playing field space enough? Not just on site, but within our community. So thank you for.
Yeah, and the topics you're raising are exactly what the consultant team and community services are going to be looking at.
Fantastic.
That's going to come later.
I have full faith that we're going to figure something out. So thank you. Those are my questions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, and I think it was just already articulated, but I mean, the reality is, right, that folks, obviously, a lot of coaches require the kids to get there early, get warmed up, to get situated, and so you do have that crossover, and currently you do have parking is at a premium. I mean, that's just the reality, and right now it's an open campus. So it is about really fine-tuning, and that's going to take somebody looking from a very global perspective. But with that, Councilmember Salazar, did you have?
Yeah, so I was curious about, one of the speakers spoke about the potential impact from that retention pond on the existing neighborhood. And I was wondering if that, and I know it's very preliminary, but that would definitely be a concern. I know that there are other areas in the city where resident slopes and the way things work out, those developments do end up having an impact on people's either their driveways or their backyards, their retaining walls and whatnot. So definitely want to make sure that we're paying attention to that as we move forward with planning this. And the other thing, we in the packet there was a comparison of what the artificial turf and lighting would potentially do to the cost of this. And since we haven't identified any funding sources as we move forward, one thing I would like to see is what our annual maintenance cost would be in both scenarios, and lighting immediately, but just leave it there for, to add at some point, because there is a concern about how much time it's going to take to develop this. And if we are waiting for additional funding or finding ways to add funding to this, it could delay when we might be able to move forward on it. So, providing some options that will get us to a usable field sooner, I think would be beneficial. I think once the development is ready to go, they're not going to wait for us, and so we want to make sure that we're able to react to that. So those are my comments.
Yeah, and to that, if not at this time, City Manager.
I think the staff was just more interested in putting on your radar that these will be topics that will require further in-depth study by Brian's team.
Thank you, sir. And I would just, to add on to Councilmember Salazar, I think this is important at those times. It's one of those things that, you can build it, and that's great, but it's about the ongoing costs, and that means, one versus the other. And what is the cycle? People say, well, turf's great. Okay. Well, we put it at Lions Field, and we really don't, that was great, but it needs maintenance. It needs repair. So all those things need to be factored, and it's the staff time and the resources. What I always get concerned about, and I've been here, in town my whole life, but I mean in some of these things, is we have great visions, and then we don't think about long-term. We want to maintain the field or a building. We want to make sure we have the resources available, that we want to know once a ribbon is cut, that we're going to maintain some expectation level that I think the community and those users will have and will want. And if not, they're going to be here. So I really want to make soccer in all of those fields. They have existing residents that they have to talk to or deal with or come to some amenable agreement. Here we're going to have existing, but we're also going to have a whole new complex, a whole new core of folks. So something needs to be somewhat worked out, because someone today might say, oh, it's fine, it doesn't bother me at all, but then all of a sudden it does bother them. And at what hour? At San Bruno Park, is on somewhat, or they used to be on timers, so it'd go off at a certain time. It just, even you could be in the middle of a game, and it goes off. So anyway, I just want to have those things factored into it. I think it's important for us to have a good decision, but having all the data and the use fields master design alternatives, and again, like it was described, it is coming back. This is just to put it on our radar. I appreciate the community's interest being here tonight, and appreciate everybody else. So with that, we will go ahead and conclude this topic. We will ask Vice Mayor Hamilton if he would be so kind as to come on back. And then as he's coming back, we're going to go on to item 8, which is council committee report outs, and we can have the Vice Mayor go last because I know he has some. Mr. Medina, do you have any at this time? No. Sandy, Councilmember Alvarez, sorry. Councilmember Salazar? No. Okay. No, I've got some, so I'll go. I attended this is on committee reports, airport land use, and sat in on that one, and it was all had to do with the San Carlos Airport development on criteria. There was a lot of discussion and whatever, but all the topics dealt with the San Carlos Airport developments around the airport, and some not close, and they all were passed, but there was some concern just on the child care participating in those developments and maybe the safety element of those small planes. Ironically, then, the Council of Cities had an event, some of us attended, which was at the San Carlos Airport. So it was ironic to have a meeting on that, go there and get a tour of the hangar and the facility, which was impressive, and is one of those things, unless you're probably a pilot, you don't get to see. On the SamTrans that I sit on, there is an opening for a public member. A public member can be anybody in the county of San Mateo that gets appointed by the board of directors and serves to review. There is one that sits from the coast, technical expert, a public board member, and so they would be meeting in San Carlos, since meetings are back to public, on Wednesdays at 2 o'clock, but it is a great opportunity, and you can go to the SamTrans website for that. And then also, as I said, on the Caltrain JPB, I'm on an ad hoc committee. I'm the chair, and it's called TOPS, a lot of acronyms, but it brought forward to the full body to award a contract for preliminary engineering services for the South Linden and Scott Street grade separation. The ad hoc committee, or standing committee, recommended it, and the board approved it. So that is for myself on committee reports, and then we'll go to the Vice Mayor.
Thank you. I want to report out on, I attended my first Peninsula Clean Energy Board of Directors meeting on April 27th, and we unanimously approved a whole bunch of administrative items I won't go into, just reporting on the most interesting stuff. We approved a $142 million contract for 180 megawatt hours of electric storage capacity at a storage facility near Barstow. And this storage capacity is a big step toward PC deliver renewable energy at night, when a lot of that comes from solar. So to have the storage capacity is going to get them toward that goal. So that was exciting. We also approved amended language in the PCE's board policies to address diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion. We agreed on improved language for several existing policies and gave staff direction to meet with labor and environmental justice groups to gather input on extending similar language to the rest of the policies and to bring those back to the PCE Executive Committee and the full board within 3 months. And then lastly, we received a report on the CPUC's sunsetting of incentives to install solar by allowing them to sell back excess generated energy back to the grid at rates designed to help them recoup the installation costs of solar. The NEM 3.0 program that was just rolled out in April reduces these incentives somewhat from previous to allow the incentive program to remain sustainable. Under NEM 2.0, the average homeowner would recoup their solar costs in 4 to 5 years. Under the new rules, this average extends to 8 to 9 years. So it's still a good economic option to go solar if you are able. And that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we'll move on to comments from council members. Anything, Mr. Medina? Oh, okay. Very quick. We had a group photo in Belmont for mental health awareness for some electeds and the commission for the county. Hyundai had their grand opening over at the mall, and so they are meeting expectation and exceeding expectation, so it's a positive. And to see that facility be once again good success. And then just in a side note, I had reached out Monday to Mayor G from the city of Redwood City upon the news of the 5 that were shot in that city, and just offering our support and thoughts as they deal with that situation. Seeing no other comments from council members, we will go ahead and adjourn this meeting to the next regular city council meeting, which will be held on May 23rd, 2023 at 7 p.m. right here. Everyone, be safe and enjoy the rest of your week. Meeting adjourned.